At 32, Mark was making more money than he ever had before. Stable job in Atlanta, decent savings, life finally starting to feel on track. So when his old car started giving problems, he saw it as an upgrade moment, something he had earned. He walked into a dealership thinking he'd buy a car and walk out feeling like he made a smart financial decision. But instead, he walked out with something else, a lease. Lower monthly payment, brand new car, and no long-term commitment. It felt like a win. The salesperson framed it perfectly. Why lock yourself into ownership when you can drive something new every few years? It sounded logical, flexible, modern, and most importantly, affordable on a monthly basis. But 3 years later, Mark found himself back in the same dealership with no car to show for the money he had spent. That's the moment most people don't think about when they choose between buying and leasing. Not the beginning, but the ending. Because on the surface, leasing looks attractive. Lower payments, less maintenance stress, always driving something new. While buying feels heavier. Higher monthly cost, long-term commitment, and responsibility of ownership. And that's exactly why so many people lean toward leasing without fully understanding the trade-off. Mark didn't feel like he made a bad decision at first. In fact, during those 3 years, everything felt smooth. No major repairs, predictable payments, and the feeling of driving a new car that matched his current lifestyle. It aligned with how he saw himself, progressing, upgrading, moving forward. But that's where psychology plays a huge role, because most financial decisions around cars aren't based on logic, they're based on identity. Leasing fits a certain mindset. It gives you the experience of a higher value car at a lower monthly cost. It allows you to match your lifestyle to your income without committing fully. And in a culture where appearance and comfort matter, that's powerful. Buying, on the other hand, feels slower, less exciting up front. You're paying more each month and the reward isn't immediate. It's delayed. Ownership, equity, long-term value, things that don't feel as emotionally rewarding in the moment. Mark didn't think about equity when he signed that lease. He thought about the payment, and that's what most people do. Because monthly payments are what we feel, total cost is what we ignore. And that's where the real difference between buying and leasing starts to show up, not in the first year, but over time. When Mark's lease ended, he had options: return the car, buy it out, or lease another one. But none of those options felt like progress, because no matter what he chose, he was starting all over again financially. And that's when the question hit him. Did I actually benefit from this, or did I just delay ownership? If you're watching this and thinking about getting a car, or you're already in a lease or loan, this is where the real conversation begins. Because the decision between buying and leasing isn't just about cars. It's about how you think about money, time, and long-term value. Make sure you like, subscribe, and join Andrew Finance. We're breaking down the real math behind leasing versus buying, and why what feels cheaper isn't always what costs less.
Mark went home that night and did something most people don't do after signing a car deal. He actually broke down the numbers. Not just the monthly payment, but the total cost over time. And that's where things started looking very different from what he felt at the dealership. His lease was around $420 a month. At the time, that felt manageable, even comfortable, compared to the $600 plus monthly payment he would have had if he financed the same car. But when he multiplied that lease payment over 3 years, plus the initial down payment, fees, and insurance differences, he realized he had spent over $16,000 and ended up with nothing. No asset, no ownership, no value to carry forward. That's the part leasing doesn't emphasize. It sells you access, not ownership. And psychologically, that's powerful, because access feels like progress. You're driving something new, something reliable, something that fits your lifestyle. But financially, you're essentially renting a depreciating asset without ever capturing any of its remaining value. Mark compared that to buying. Yes, the monthly payment was higher. Yes, it felt heavier in the beginning. But over time, that payment was building something. Even though cars depreciate, they don't go to zero instantly. After a few years of payments, you still own something that has resale value. And that difference changes the long-term equation. Leasing resets you every few years. Buying moves you forward. But here's where it gets more nuanced and where most people oversimplify the decision. Leasing isn't always a bad choice. It depends on how you use it. For someone who values predictability, drives limited miles, wants lower short-term costs, and prefers always being in a new vehicle, leasing can make sense, especially if they treat it as a lifestyle expense, not an investment. But the problem is, most people don't think of it that way. They treat leasing like a smart financial move when it's actually a convenience decision. Mark realized that his decision wasn't about logic, it was about comfort. The lower monthly payment made him feel like he was being responsible, when in reality he was just postponing the real cost. Another thing he noticed was how leasing shapes your behavior. Because you don't own the car, you're always aware of restrictions, mileage limits, wear and tear, condition at return. It's not full freedom, it's controlled usage. And while that's fine for some people, it's still a limitation. On the other hand, ownership comes with flexibility. Once you pay off a car, your monthly cost drops dramatically. You can drive it as long as you want, sell it, or trade it in. That's where the long-term advantage starts showing. But again, this requires patience, and patience is where most people struggle. Because we're wired to optimize for the present. Lower payment today feels better than higher value tomorrow, and that's exactly why leasing continues to feel attractive. Mark also thought about something deeper: opportunity cost. The money he was putting into leasing wasn't building him anything. If he had bought a slightly cheaper car, paid it off, and kept it longer, he could have redirected those future payments into savings or investments. That's where buying starts to win long-term. Not because cars are great investments, they're not, but because ownership eventually reduces your expenses. Leasing keeps them constant, and constant expenses limit your ability to build wealth over time. Mark didn't regret leasing completely. It taught him something more valuable than the car itself. It showed him how easy it is to confuse affordability with value. Because just because something fits your monthly budget doesn't mean it's the better financial decision. If you're listening to this and thinking about your own situation, whether you're considering leasing, financing, or already in a deal, this is where you need to pause and look beyond the surface.
3 years later, Mark found himself standing in the same dealership, but this time he wasn't looking at the car, he was looking at the cycle. Because once the lease ended, the decision in front of him looked almost identical to the one he faced before. Start another lease, finance the buyout, or walk away and begin again with something new. And that's when it hit him. Leasing didn't just give him a car, it gave him a repeating monthly obligation. That realization changed the way he looked at the entire decision. Because the real question isn't which is cheaper right now. The real question is, which decision puts me in a stronger financial position 3 to 5 years from now? And for most average people in the US, that answer depends less on the car and more on behavior. If you are someone who changes cars every 2 to 3 years, no matter what, values lower short-term payments, wants minimal repair risk, and doesn't drive too many miles, leasing can absolutely make sense. But you have to be honest with yourself. It is a lifestyle expense. It is not a wealth-building move. Buying, on the other hand, starts slower but gets stronger over time. Mark decided to run the numbers over a 6-year period. If he leased 2 cars back to back, he would continue making payments the entire time, likely spending over $30,000 with no ownership at the end. But if he bought a reliable used or slightly less expensive new car and financed it for 5 years, by year 6, he could be driving payment-free. That's where the financial difference becomes real. A paid-off car creates breathing room, and breathing room is one of the most underrated wealth tools in personal finance. Because once your car payment disappears, that monthly cash flow can be redirected into savings, into investing, into paying down other debt. And this is where buying often becomes the better long-term choice for people focused on wealth. Mark also realized something psychological that mattered even more than the math. Leasing kept him thinking short-term. Every decision revolved around the monthly number. What can I comfortably pay right now?
But buying forced him to think in terms of total cost and future flexibility. And that shift in thinking changed more than just how he viewed cars. It changed how he viewed money itself. Instead of asking, what gives me the nicer car today, he started asking, what gives me more freedom later? That question is powerful, because a lot of financial decisions in life work the same way. The easier option now often creates longer obligations later, and the harder option now often creates freedom later. He eventually decided to buy a reliable, slightly used car instead of starting another lease. Not because it looked better, not because it felt exciting, but because it aligned with what he actually wanted, less financial pressure in the future. And that's the real answer to buying versus leasing. Leasing is better for short-term comfort and predictable access. Buying is better for long-term control and financial flexibility. Neither choice is automatically right or wrong. The mistake happens when people choose based on emotion while convincing themselves it's purely financial. If your priority is image, convenience, and lower short-term payments, leasing might suit your lifestyle. If your priority is building wealth, reducing fixed monthly expenses, and eventually driving without payments, buying usually wins. Mark looked back at his first lease and finally understood it clearly. It wasn't a mistake. It was a lesson in how easily monthly affordability can hide long-term cost. And that lesson made every future decision sharper. So before choosing, ask yourself something simple. Do you want the better car today or the better financial position tomorrow? Because that answer will tell you what's actually the better choice.
If this video opened your eyes, make sure you subscribe, because what you learn today can save your future tomorrow.